Imagine standing at the edge of a vast, still lake on a perfect summer morning. The water is glass, the air is warm, and you know that if you just dive in, you'll feel alive, refreshed, and proud. But you hesitate. You tell yourself the water might be cold or that you'll do it later, after you've checked your phone, after you've had a snack, after the sun is a little higher. Minutes slip into hours, the day passes, and you never swim. You return home, not exhausted, but somehow heavier. That weight you feel isn't fatigue from effort, it's the quiet, insidious cost of doing nothing. That cost has a name, and it's one we rarely see on any bill, yet we pay it every single day. It's the laziness tax. Now, when we talk about laziness, we're not pointing fingers or using the word as a moral judgment. We're talking about that very human tendency to avoid discomfort, to delay action, to choose the path of least resistance in the moment, even when it betrays the person we want to become. The laziness tax is the cumulative price we pay for those small, seemingly harmless choices to do nothing, to put things off, to stay in the warm, familiar cocoon of inaction. And here's the terrifying truth. Unlike monetary taxes, which are a percentage of what you earn, the laziness tax is a percentage of what you could have become. It's a debt that compounds, silently stealing not just your time, but your potential, your confidence, your health, and your joy. This isn't about shaming ourselves for resting. It's about waking up to the hidden invoice that arrives when we consistently trade what we want most for what we want right now. The core thesis is deceptively simple. Every moment we choose inaction over action, we are not merely standing still. We are actively moving backward. The world is dynamic, it does not pause for our hesitation. While we delay, opportunities decay, skills atrophy, relationships wither, and our own self-respect erodes. The laziness tax is the difference between the life we could be living and the life we settle for, and it's paid in the currency of regret, missed connections, poor health, and financial strain. It's the weight of all the things we didn't do, the words we didn't say, the risks we didn't take, and the work we didn't start. And the most painful part? We often don't realize we're paying it until the bill is long overdue, and the interest has made the debt feel insurmountable. Let's break this down into its key components, because the laziness tax isn't a single, monolithic force. It's a web of interconnected costs that touch every area of our lives. The first and most immediate is the financial tax. This is the one we can sometimes see most clearly, though we often rationalize it away. Think about the last time you put off a simple home repair, like a leaky faucet or a small crack in the wall. That minor issue, ignored for months, becomes a major expense. The drip turns into water damage, the crack widens and requires structural work. You've paid a premium for your inaction. The same principle applies to our careers. How many of us have stayed in a comfortable but unfulfilling job, avoiding the discomfort of updating a resume, learning a new skill, or having a difficult conversation about a raise? That avoidance costs us not just the immediate salary increase, but the compound growth of that higher income over years. A $5,000 raise you don't negotiate at age 30 because you didn't prepare isn't just $5,000. Over a career, with investments and raises, that single act of inaction can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. We pay a laziness tax on our bills when we incur late fees, on our credit cards when we don't pay the full balance, on our health when we skip preventative care and then face a medical crisis. The financial laziness tax is the most literal, but it's just the entry point. Then there's the health tax, which is perhaps the most tragic because it's paid with the very fabric of our days. We know we should exercise, eat well, and sleep enough. The knowledge is not the problem. The problem is the gap between knowing and doing. Every time we choose the couch over a walk, the processed snack over a meal we cook, the late-night scroll over an early bedtime, we are making a down payment on a future of diminished vitality. The laziness tax here isn't just about gaining weight or feeling sluggish, it's about the slow, almost imperceptible decline in our physical capabilities. It's the breathlessness climbing a flight of stairs that wasn't there 5 years ago. It's the chronic back pain from poor posture and weak core muscles we never took the time to strengthen. It's the diagnosis that could have been prevented or managed with earlier lifestyle changes. This tax robs us of the energy we need to play with our children, to travel, to simply enjoy a pain-free existence. We trade the temporary comfort of doing nothing for a permanent reduction in our quality of life. Beyond the physical, there is a profound psychological and emotional tax. This is where the cost becomes deeply personal and often invisible to the outside world. Every time we procrastinate on a meaningful task, we don't just delay the task. We create a low-level hum of anxiety in our minds. That unfinished project, that unreturned call, that closet we've been meaning to organize, they all take up mental real estate. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Our brain's tendency to keep unfinished tasks in a state of heightened activation. This constant, nagging stress is a direct withdrawal from our mental peace. But the deeper cut is to our self-trust. Every time we make a promise to ourselves, I'll start writing tomorrow, I'll go to the gym on Monday, and then break it, we are teaching ourselves that our word to ourselves is worthless. We erode our own self-efficacy, the fundamental belief that we can do what we set out to do. This is the most devastating compound interest of the laziness tax. A person who doesn't trust themselves to follow through lives in a smaller, more fearful world. They stop setting ambitious goals because they've learned that the pain of not achieving them is worse than the pain of never trying. They pay the tax with their dreams. The relational tax is equally steep. Strong relationships are built on 1,000 tiny acts of effort. The attentive listening when you're tired, the difficult conversation you'd rather avoid, the planned date night, the spontaneous expression of appreciation. Laziness in relationships is a slow-acting poison. It's the text message you didn't send, the call you didn't make, the visit you kept postponing until it became awkward. Over time, the silence grows and the connection fades. We pay the relational tax in loneliness, in friendships that drift into acquaintances, in family bonds that become brittle, in romantic partnerships that turn into roommate arrangements. The effort we avoid today is the intimacy we lose tomorrow. And here's the cruel twist. The more we avoid these small acts of connection, the harder they become, until the relationship itself feels like a burden, and we wonder how we drifted so far apart. Finally, there is the tax on our time and freedom. This is the great paradox of laziness. We choose inaction because we believe it preserves our free time, but in reality, it mortgages our future time at a predatory rate. The hour you spend mindlessly scrolling social media because you don't want to tackle a work project is an hour you'll never get back. But more than that, the project will still be there now with less time to complete it, forcing you into a frantic, stressful rush later. You've traded a calm, focused hour of work for 2 hours of anxious, last-minute scrambling. You've paid a 100% interest rate on your own time. On a larger scale, the laziness tax on our freedom is the career we're trapped in because we never built the skills or side business to escape. It's the years we have to keep working because we didn't save and invest early. Inaction doesn't keep us free, it builds a cage around our future selves bar by bar with every postponed decision. To make this real, let's look at some notable examples and stories that illustrate the laziness tax in action. Consider the story of two friends, both 25, both with the opportunity to start investing a modest $200 a month. One takes the action, opens an account, and automates the investment. The other knows it's important but never gets around to it, always finding a reason to delay. By the time they're 65, assuming a 7% annual return, the first friend has over $500,000. The second has nothing but a vague regret. The laziness tax here isn't just the missing $500,000, it's the freedom that money represents, the ability to retire, to help family, to not be a burden. The second friend paid a tax that was invisible for 40 years and then suddenly devastatingly visible. Or think about the world of elite sports. A young athlete with immense talent coasts through high school on natural ability, skipping the extra practice, the film study, the recovery work. A less gifted teammate puts in the unglamorous, consistent effort. By the time they're both competing for a college scholarship, the hard worker has surpassed the natural talent. The lazy athlete pays the tax with a dream that dies quietly, not in a dramatic failure, but in the slow accumulation of all the shots they didn't take, the sprints they didn't run. We see this in creative fields too. The writer who talks about their novel for a decade, but never writes a page. The musician who owns a beautiful guitar gathering dust. Their tax is the masterpiece that will never exist, the songs that will never be heard. The world is poorer for their inaction, and so are they. A more everyday example is the cluttered home. A person lets dishes pile up, mail accumulate, and clutter spread because cleaning feels overwhelming. Each day, the mess grows and the psychological weight of it increases. The task that would have taken 10 minutes now requires a whole weekend of exhausting, demoralizing work. The laziness tax is paid in the stress of living in chaos, the embarrassment of never inviting friends over, the hours of life lost to a preventable mess. It's a perfect microcosm. The avoidance of a small, immediate discomfort creates a much larger, long-term pain. Now, it's crucial that we address the counter-arguments and critiques with honesty because this topic can easily veer into toxic hustle culture if we're not careful. The most important distinction we must make is between laziness and rest. True rest is not a tax, it's an investment. Our bodies and minds need recovery. Burnout is real, and it's often the result of chronic overwork, not laziness. When we are genuinely depleted, doing nothing is not a vice, it's a biological necessity. The laziness tax applies when we are avoiding a task that we have the energy and capacity to do, but we're choosing avoidance out of fear, boredom, or a desire for instant gratification. Rest replenishes, laziness depletes. We must learn to feel the difference in our bodies. Rest feels like a peaceful exhale. Laziness often feels like a restless, guilty stagnation. Another valid critique is that what we label as laziness is often a symptom of deeper issues: depression, anxiety, ADHD, or chronic stress. For someone struggling with clinical depression, the inability to take action is not a moral failing, it's a medical symptom. Telling them they're paying a laziness tax is not only unhelpful but harmful. The concept is most useful for those of us who are fundamentally capable but caught in patterns of procrastination and avoidance. It's a framework for self-motivation, not a stick to beat ourselves or others with. If you suspect your inaction stems from a mental health condition, the most important action you can take is to seek professional help. That in itself is a powerful payment against a much larger tax. There's also a systemic perspective. Sometimes the barriers to action are not internal, but external. A person living in a food desert with no access to fresh produce isn't paying a laziness tax on their health. They're paying a poverty tax, an access tax. A worker in a rigid, dead-end job with no educational opportunities isn't lazy for not getting ahead. They're trapped by economic structures. We must apply this concept with nuance, recognizing that while personal agency is real, it operates within a context of privilege and constraint. The laziness tax is a lens for examining our individual choices where we do have agency, not a blanket explanation for all of life's hardships. So with that balanced understanding, how do we stop paying this crippling tax? How do we start reclaiming our potential, our health, and our peace? The practical takeaways are not about grand overnight transformations. They're about small, consistent acts of rebellion against the inertia that wants to claim our lives. The first and most powerful step is to shrink the action. The laziness tax thrives on our perception that a task is too big, too hard, or too scary, so we must make it laughably small. If you've been avoiding exercise, your goal is not to run a 5K tomorrow. Your goal is to put on your running shoes and step outside for 2 minutes. That's it. If you've been avoiding writing, your goal is to write one terrible sentence. The magic of this approach is that it bypasses our brain's resistance. Once you're outside with your shoes on, you'll often walk further. Once you've written one sentence, the next one comes easier. But even if you stop after 2 minutes, you've still won. You've kept a promise to yourself, you've paid your anti-tax, and that builds momentum. Next, we need to make the costs of inaction immediate and visceral. Our brains are wired to prioritize present rewards over future consequences, which is why the laziness tax is so easy to ignore. We can hack this by creating immediate consequences. Tell a friend your goal and give them $100. If you don't complete the task by a deadline, they keep the money. Or use a commitment app that donates to a charity you hate if you fail. The sting of losing that money now is more motivating than the abstract benefit of a healthier future. We can also visualize the future cost in painful detail. Spend 5 minutes vividly imagining your life in 10 years if you change nothing. What does your health look like? Your relationships, your career regrets? Feel the weight of that future. Then, let that pain fuel your action today. Another essential practice is to reduce friction for the things you want to do and increase friction for the things you want to avoid. If you want to read more, put a book on your pillow in the morning so you have to touch it before bed. Delete social media apps from your phone so you have to re-download them to scroll. If you want to eat healthier, prep vegetables on Sunday so they're the easiest thing to grab. Design your environment to make the right choice the easy choice. The laziness tax often wins simply because the path of least resistance leads to a cliff. We must re-engineer that path. We must also learn to embrace the concept of doing it badly. Perfectionism is the laziness tax's most sophisticated ally. We often avoid starting because we fear we won't do it perfectly, so we must give ourselves permission to do a mediocre job. A messy, imperfect workout is infinitely better than no workout. A poorly written first draft can be edited, a blank page cannot. The goal is not perfection. The goal is to break the seal of inaction. Once we're in motion, we can adjust and improve, but we have to start before we're ready, before we feel confident, before the conditions are ideal. The ideal moment is a myth that keeps us paying the tax. Finally, we need to cultivate a practice of honest self-reflection. At the end of each day, ask yourself, where did I pay the laziness tax today? Where did I choose avoidance over action? Don't do this to shame yourself, but to build awareness. Shame is a terrible long-term motivator. Curiosity is a great one. Notice the patterns. What tasks do you consistently avoid? What stories do you tell yourself to justify the avoidance? I'm too tired. I'll do it tomorrow. It's not that important. Write these down. Seeing them on paper robs them of their power. Then ask a second question. What would the person I want to become do right now? And then, just for 5 minutes, be that person. So what is the final verdict on the laziness tax? It is, without question, one of the most pervasive and destructive forces in our lives, precisely because it operates in the shadows, disguised as comfort, safety, and rest. It is the silent thief of dreams, the compound interest on our fears, the architect of a life half-lived. But here is the empowering truth that we must carry with us. The laziness tax is a voluntary levy. No external authority imposes it upon us. We choose to pay it moment by moment with our inaction. And that means we can also choose to stop paying it. The power to revoke this tax lies entirely in our hands. This is not a call to a frantic, joyless grind. It's an invitation to a more intentional, alive existence. It's about recognizing that the pain of discipline weighs ounces, while the pain of regret weighs tons. Every time we choose to act, to do the small, hard thing that moves us forward, we are not just avoiding a cost, we are making a deposit into a different kind of account. An account that pays dividends in self-respect, in vitality, in deep relationships, and in the quiet, profound satisfaction of a life fully lived. The opposite of the laziness tax isn't busyness, it's agency. It's the freedom that comes from knowing you are the author of your days, not a passive recipient of whatever drifts your way. So let's make a pact, you and I. Let's stop letting the days slip through our fingers like water. Let's feel the weight of that unlived potential and let it galvanize us, not paralyze us. The next time you feel the pull to do nothing, to put it off, to stay comfortable, I want you to hear a small voice in your head asking, "Can I afford this tax?" And I want you to know, deep in your bones, that the answer is no. You cannot afford it, none of us can. The cost is simply too high. But the good news, the miraculous, everyday good news, is that the payment to avoid it is so small, it's just one step, one word, one breath of courage. Take it now. The bill for doing nothing is already in the mail. Let's tear it up together and start building a life that is tax-free.